Hello, good morning. Today we are going to learn about the passive transport and facilitated diffusion. Passive diffusion. So, what is the passive diffusion or what is the diffusion? Diffusion is the net movement of molecules from a region of their high concentration to a region of their lower concentration. The molecules move down along a concentration gradient. It means that suppose if you consider the cell it means the cell has the two ends, one is the inside or one is the outside. If the solute is higher concentration in outside of the cell, then it directly diffuses from outside to inside of the cell. It's called as the along a concentration gradient. Okay, so passive diffusion is not required any type of energy or any type of special transport mechanisms or proteins for the diffusion across the plasma membrane, because mostly the solutes which are easily dissolved in lipids can diffuse across the plasma membrane, like the carbon dioxides polar but very small, so diffuses very quickly. Oxygen molecule is a non-polar and very small in molecule size, therefore it diffuses very quickly, like the molecules of waters and ethanol. The very small size, water and ethanol is having a very smaller size, though they are the polar, but having due to the very smaller size they can easily diffuses across the plasma membrane or across the plasma membrane through the phospholipids. Benzenes which diffuses across the plasma membrane through the phospholipids. But here is one interesting point, is that charged molecules, whether whatever whatever their sizes, but charged molecules like the H plus, Na plus, K plus, Cl minus, Mg plus, and other amino acids are unable to cross the plasma membrane because of their charge. So passive diffusion is the non-selective process by which any molecule able to dissolve in a phospholipid bilayer and cross the plasma membrane with equilibration between the inside and outside of the cell. Now we can see the facilitated diffusion. Here large polar molecules such as glucose, amino acids cannot diffuse across the phospholipid bilayer because their sizes are very large, or they are the very big molecules, and second one, they are not dissolved in a lipids, so they cannot directly diffuse through plasma membrane, which is a composition by made by the phospholipids and the proteins. Mostly 80 or 90% are the lipid composition and 10% is a protein composition of the plasma membrane. The ions like the Na plus or Cl cannot pass. Okay, previously in previous slides we can see that we have seen that. So these molecules pass through the protein channels. Okay, so the mechanism is that these are the chargeable molecules, or the glucose, like the molecules like glucose or amino acids which are in a bigger size as compared to the oxygen or carbon dioxides. So there are protein molecules by which these solutes are transported along the concentration gradient through plasma membrane from inside to outside or outside to inside of the cell. So the diffusion of such a molecules or such a solutes through carrier or channels is called as facilitated diffusion. Because this is a diffusion, it means it passes through plasma membrane from higher concentration to lower concentration. It doesn't require energy, but it requires certainly a protein which are aggregates or which are integrates into the phospholipids or embedded into the phospholipids membrane. So these are called as the facilitated diffusion. Molecules will randomly move through the opening like pore by diffusion. This requires no energy. It is a passive transport. Why this is passive transport? Because it's along the concentration gradient from higher concentration to lower concentration. Therefore after the equilibrium, after the reaching at equilibrium point, the transport of such a solutes stop. Therefore, there is no requirement of the energy. Molecules move from an area of a high concentration to an area of low concentration. After reaching the equilibrium point, the transportation stop. The only difference between passive and facilitated diffusion is the molecules go through a protein channel in facilitated diffusion instead of passing between the phospholipids, because in previous slide we have seen that passive diffusion is the diffusion along the concentration gradient through the plasma membrane, it means through lipids, and here is the through proteins. Now there is a two types of the facilitated diffusions, the diffusion through the carrier proteins or diffusion through the channel proteins. Carrier proteins undergo conformational changes while transporting. It also non-covalently binds with solute molecules. Why these are non-covalently bound? Because if any solutes is covalently bound with the covalently bound with the proteins, then it's very hard to dissociate of that molecules from the protein, and therefore these dedicated carrier proteins may be chances or might be lost because of the permanently attachment of solute molecules to that protein. Therefore here is a bonding is a non-covalently bonding. Then channel proteins, aquaporins dedicated for the water channels for rapid passage, then passive diffusion. As we are seen in a previous point, aquaporins are the dedicated proteins or dedicated channels for water molecules. Here the channel proteins gives the example of aquaporins. Ion channels are highly selective because narrow pore allow only appropriate size and chargeable ions. Transport is extremely rapid. Here the figure of that facilitated diffusion and passive diffusion. Here we can, in first figure passive diffusion, we are clearly seen that the transport, there are the two bidirectional arrows outside and inside. Lipid soluble molecules, oxygen, carbon dioxide, H2O. Water is a lipid soluble, not a, actually H2O is not a lipid soluble, but its size is very small, only having the two hydrogen and one oxygen molecules. Therefore it easily pass through that lipid molecules. In between the lipid molecules, these molecules are easily passes from inside to outside. Okay, so this is a passive diffusion, and here is the facilitated diffusion. We see that the molecules, the bigger molecules like glucose, amino acids, are from outside of the cell, transported from outside of the cell to inside of the cell through that particularly carrier proteins. Here is the conformational changes. When